Good evening and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings the Constitution, the law, and the events of today to you each month. Good evening, and tonight we're here for our very special Law Talk, and that's going to be a debate. Tonight we have Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush, two candidates that are running for next year's election. And I welcome both candidates tonight. I'd like to start with Ms. Clinton. Can you please give us a 10-second introduction on your positions?
Hello, how are you tonight? So I think, first of all, our step one is to reform corporate America. I think the spending on Wall Street has been out of control. I think apprehending Wall Street would be fabulous for the economy. How about limited dividend payments to shareholders to channel profits to employees? I think that's
But I have a
step one.
question, Ms. Clinton. Isn't the Clinton Foundation, wouldn't that be affected by that type of regulation?
It would, but I think other items on my agenda include the climate change, number one. How about we funnel all the oil spending into alternative energy resources? I think
So
that'd be
what you're
very
trying
good.
to say is that you're not trying to give up on oil. You just want to funnel the money from oil to something else.
Yes, it could create about 5 million jobs, as we calculated.
5 million jobs. Well, I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Bush. Mr. Bush, you just heard your opponent talk about a couple of issues. How do you respond to that?
Well, Jim, you can call me Jeb. I'm from Texas, okay? Now, lately I've been governor of Florida. Now, what we did in government of Florida is we cut taxes and the economy grew. What Ms. Clinton wants to do is raise taxes and shrink the economy. We like big things in Texas. I'm from Texas. We like big economies. We don't like little, tiny, overtaxed economies.
Well, when you say big economies, what are you looking for, actually, Jeb?
Well, part of it is energy. You know, if we have energy, that helps every American. If oil prices are low and energy prices are low, every American, the price of bread is lower, the price of beef is lower, everything you need day to day is lower because, let's face it, most of the stuff that people buy is trucked. And if the energy prices are lower, you save on prices on everything. Now, Clinton's buddy Obama the secretary said, oh, we want to get up to $10 a gallon. I don't think we need gas up at $10 a gallon. I think it makes everything too expensive.
Well, Ms. Clinton, how do you respond to that when you're talking about $10 a gallon for a price of gas that would literally affect the lower half of the earners in this country?
Well, I think there are more forward-thinking ways to do things. I think producing 33% of the nation's electricity from renewable sources by 2027 is a good idea, and that's 7% more than it is now. Obama called it for 20% by 2030. I think we're moving things along quicker.
The only problem I have, and I know my audience does as well, is how do you run a car with a sail, Mrs. Clinton?
Well, leave it to the scientists. As I said, vaccines are the way to go. I think scientists know what they're talking about.
Mr. Bush, how do you counter that idea that we're going to live on renewables by 2027?
Well, I'd just like to say, Hillary, you look very nice, and I know that you're a very important, powerful person. You're surrounding people, but you seem like a lonely person. I was wondering, maybe one time you'd like to go out for some coffee and pie or something like that.
Okay, can I pick the place?
Yeah, you can pick the place.
In my house?
Yeah, sure. But the thing is, what we're talking about here is renewable energy. Well, that's not a whisper in a hurricane. Let's face it, renewable energy is like 2 or 3% of our energy needs. Basically, coal's like 40 or 50% of our energy needs. If we went back to 3% of our energy needs, we'd be rubbing two sticks together and living in a cave.
Well, when you talk about living in a cave, how do we like that cave, Mr. Bush?
Well, I'm telling you, I've been called a caveman, but I would still rather have oil heating or gas heating in my cave than be rubbing two sticks together.
You know, I'd like to ask you, Mrs. Clinton, that the idea about renewable energy is very exciting. And I know that there's big pushes for solar, wind power, and gas power. I understand all that. So how would you combine transportation with the limitation on natural fossil fuels?
No comment at this time.
Mr. Bush?
Okay, well, I think the first thing we ought to do is when you look at the, they want to do a pipeline up there, up in Montana, up with the Canadians, and that's been stalled for a long time. Now, I actually believe we have enough oil in the United States to be energy self-sufficient. But the Keystone Pipeline should go through because that'd give us a shot in the arm. That'd be a lot of jobs just right off the bat, building the pipeline, refinery jobs. And also, we haven't had a new refinery built in the United States in 50 years. And also, we're restricted from selling oil in the United States. So if we change those things, we'd have a boost to the economy almost instantly.
Ms. Clinton, how do you respond when we're talking about the Keystone Pipeline specifically?
Well, I remember when you were against the auto bailout. Isn't that something that I think probably saved a lot of the economy?
Well, as far as the auto bailout, as far as government motors, I mean, that was kind of a problem because the investors didn't get bailed out, but the union got bailed out. So I guess it depends on who you're looking at, who got bailed out.
Well, who did get bailed out?
The unions got bailed out.
The unions got bailed out.
The banks got two bailed out.
What's that?
The banks got two bailed out.
Well, I know, but the investors didn't get bailed out. The investors took the hit.
Well, let's take another look, Ms. Clinton. Your name's been in the newspaper a lot lately, talking about issues involving your time as Secretary of State. So when you're talking about your time as Secretary of State, there's been a lot of commentary on whether or not the Clinton Foundation was receiving large sums of money from rogue regimes that you actually gave preferential treatment to. Do you have any response to that comment regarding rogue regimes in the Clinton Foundation?
It might have been in an email or two, maybe.
Email or two?
It might have been.
Are we talking about emails that you kept track of as Secretary of State?
Exactly.
And have you produced? You know that there's been an investigation by several congressional committees regarding emails that involve the Clinton Foundation and you specifically. During that time, did you produce all the emails that you were supposed to have?
I wrote them all, yes, if you mean produce.
Mr. Bush, do you have any commentary on this whole email campaign that Ms. Clinton's been facing in the news?
Well, it all seems a little bit confusing because first of all, there weren't any emails. And then there were 60,000, then 30,000 got erased, and then none of them were government emails, and then some of them were, and then some of them were top secret, and some of them weren't. Now it turns out some of them were classified, some of them were top secret, and those were kept on a private server somewhere in a bathroom somewhere in Montana.
So, Mrs. Clinton, how do you respond to that?
Well, if you read my Facebook page today, I did apologize. So I say that's pretty official. I think the FBI was on my tail for a little bit. I think they might have found some evidence of personal and private and State Department, and yes, I've admitted that. But
well,
I don't really want to talk about it.
Wait a minute, Ms. Clinton. Mr. Bush, how you've been following this, I know, because it's part of one of your campaigns to be transparent. Has Ms. Clinton been transparent with her email?
Well, it seems like it raises a couple questions about veracity and honesty and that kind of thing. If 30,000 emails get deleted and you're claiming those are personal, but the only people who got to decide whether they're personal or not were the attorneys from Ms. Clinton, and no one else, the State Department didn't get to make that determination. So I think that's kind of raised doubt in some people's mind whether the right ones got deleted.
Ms. Clinton, what do you respond to when you talk about deleted emails? Do you have a response to that?
I'd rather not discuss it. Like I said, it's been on my Facebook
Well, why
page.
is that, Ms. Clinton?
You
know this is an important matter.
I'd like to move on. I'd like to move on. Just like Benghazi.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, the thing is, the questions everyone's asking is, did you delete the emails? Did you erase the server?
No, I'm more worried about the emails.
Well, I'm sorry, we got to talk about this. We got to talk about these emails a little bit. Don't shoot.
Ms. Clinton.
Don't shoot. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There we go.
Oh, Mrs. Clinton. Mrs. Clinton, put that gun down, please.
Okay.
Mr. Bush, are you capable of continuing this debate?
Yeah, it's just a scratch.
Oh, that's flesh wound in Texas.
Yeah, I'm from Texas. It's just a scratch.
All right, Mr. Bush. Well, we have other topics to cover tonight. Mrs. Clinton, can you control yourself?
Yes, gun is down. 25%
Can you please
gun
put the
tax,
gun
by the
down,
way.
Mrs. Clinton? All right, Mr. Bush, what do you know about a gentleman named Philip North and the EPA?
Well, Philip North was a bureaucrat, and he seemed to get into almost a personal vendetta with a mining company. And he went ahead and generated public condemnation of this mining company. And also, it seems like he encouraged people kind of make up some science to keep these guys from Pebble from getting their permit.
Well, what do you know about this, Mrs. Clinton? This was a big deal with the EPA because they were exercising the Clean Water Act under this. How's your response to Mr. Bush?
Yes, so this dates back years ago, the Pebble Mine in southwest Alaska. They found out it was a mineral exploration project investigating large amounts of copper, gold, basically a gold mine, literally, for jewelers, so to speak, around the world. Some opposed it, like UK jewelers, that they would ever go into there because there was fear that it would hurt the salmon fishing. So this man, Philip North, he got involved. Kind of prematurely, it sounds, kind of like his pet project of wanting to put a stop to it.
And so, as far as you know, did Mr. North do anything inappropriate under his position with the EPA?
So he was the one who, kind of forcefully shut it down. Judge in Alaska thought the Pebble Mine Group had enough of a case to pursue why he wanted to shut it down, like we said, under the Clean Water Act. And now it's kind of, he's been MIA, and they have a subpoena for him to appear in court.
Well, Mr. Bush, when Ms. Clinton talks about an MIA, that normally means missing in action. Why would a former EPA member be missing in action when there's a congressional investigation regarding falsification of data from the EPA?
Well, there's a little more of a backstory on that. Not only did this guy kind of manufacture some science and manufacture public outrage, he also, his computer crashed, and his hard drive was damaged, and he lost all his emails.
Wait. This is sounding awfully familiar. This has happened more than once in this current regime. Can you explain a little bit how the emails crashed?
We don't know. We just know that according to the EPA, they can't find the emails. It's kind of a familiar pattern. But also, then Mr. North went on a boat trip, and he's been on the boat trip for about a year, so he hasn't been able to answer the subpoena, and nobody really knows when he's going to get back from his round-the-world boat trip.
Wait a minute. I understand that he actually has a family. He took children out of school to go on this boat trip.
Yeah, it's a family trip.
Does anybody know where the boat trip landed?
Last thing that people heard, he was in Australia, but that's not really confirmed.
Is this anything like Gilligan's Island?
Yes.
Plus, it's winter now there, so that's fishy.
Yeah, so who knows? Well, that thing is, he's on the big, long boat trip, and the EPA has been getting in a lot of trouble with mines lately. There's another mine they worked on, and they blew open the mine and made of the Yellow River of 3 rivers and one thing or another. And just days before they went ahead and did that, geologists had wrote a letter to the editor saying, whatever you do, don't go ahead and mess with this. Don't touch it. Leave it just how it is. And, of course, they went ahead and messed with it, and they blew up and polluted 3 rivers.
Right, and my understanding of that disaster was that the EPA was trying to control sludge that they were charged with controlling. Is that what happened, Mr. Bush?
Well, it didn't work out so well. And also, the EPA did an internal investigation about the disaster, which most companies or corporations would have been, severely fined or thrown in jail, or at least everyone would have been fired. But the EPA did their own internal investigation, and they found that the spill would have happened anyway.
So we're talking about the same type of internal investigation like the IRS did under Lois Lerner and the EPA is now doing. Now, Ms. Clinton, what do you feel about the EPA, and do you think they should be regulated a little more thoroughly to ensure that there's an overwatch or a watchdog group that's in charge of the EPA?
Right. Well, especially because they're is one point person now in question. And they said that one of his hard drives was encrypted, and no one knows why that would even be, why he would have to have an encrypted hard drive, which has been hard to track.
Well, aren't the rules in the government that all your emails are supposed to be controlled by the government? And technically speaking, if somebody is an agent for the EPA and in a position of authority, that his emails should also be open to the public through the proper government channels.
Mm-hmm. And be able to physically track him.
So you're a firm supporter in ensuring transparency when it comes to emails.
I am. I think I've learned my lesson.
Learned your lesson well. Mr. Bush, what do you feel about that?
I don't want to get shot again.
Okay, so we're going to leave that alone, but let's move on. Let's move on a little more about this EPA. The Clean Water Act. How is that being applied now, Mr. Bush?
Well, the Clean Water Act's being applied in the same way the Clean Air Act. They're saying carbon's a pollutant, and they're saying that basically any puddle of water is a navigable water. Now, I guess if you had a toy boat or something, it'd be navigable. But now they're starting to claim that any body of water is a navigable water, and that puts it under the paradigm of the Clean Water Act. And so people who have it rains in their pasture or something, all of a sudden now this is a Clean Water Act issue, and they can't drain their pond.
Well, I have a question. Doesn't that affect a lot of farmers and a lot of people that are normal? They have farms with ranches and orchards, and how does the Clean Water Act affect them?
Well, sure. I mean, if you got something, like you got standing water is going to have mosquitoes or one thing or another, or you want to have proper drainage so you don't have flooding. You want to, when you want to drain that area now, in a lot of cases, people are getting fined for doing that.
Okay, so you're telling me now that EPA is saying that they have the enforcement capability of a police force?
Well, they always had the enforcement capability of the police force. They have badges and they have guns. They're heavily armed. They are a heavily armed, law enforcement agency. So they've always had that power. But now they have a lot more guns than they used to. A lot more agents are armed than there used to be. And also, they tend to, do these kind of SWAT team raids and stuff like that, and a lot more frequency than they used to.
Well, I have a question. Is this been under this current administration that the EPA has been more fully armed, or has this gone back several presidents?
Well, I think it's been going on, and I think it was in 9/11 they started arming all the federal agents, right? So all the agents started getting more heavily armed. But as far as how pervasively their enforcement powers are, that's grossly increased under the Obama administration.
Okay.
I mean, a tenfold or 100-fold. Easily.
That's pretty incredible. So let's hope that the EPA is going to treat us nicely. And that goes back to you, Ms. Clinton. One last question. I didn't really get a good answer on this, but what would you do to control the EPA and rule it in a little bit from its over police activities?
Well, I think agents like this, Philip Morth, he's a little one-off. He came in before there was even a question about the environmental safety of this mine, way before 2010. So I think just individual regulation is best.
Okay. Well, any last words on this subject, Mr. Bush?
I just been shot. I appreciate you don't bring up last words. Okay.
Do you need any Band-Aids over there?
It's just a scratch. I'm from Texas. We're tough. It's just
all right.
a scratch.
I think at this point we're going to have to leave it, and we're going to move on to our next subject, and our final subject for debate tonight. And this is a hot topic that I want you to both think clearly about, because the fate of our nation may lay in your hands. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Clinton. Are you familiar with the current deal that was worked out with Iran regarding nuclear proliferation?
Yes.
Are you familiar with this transaction?
I am. So
and can you tell me what your interpretation of this transaction is?
So basically, Iran is about to potentially get $100 billion from lifted sanctions that date back to oil sales that they generated in different countries over time. Syria, China, Turkey, they think. I'm sorry, South Korea, China, India. And so the fear is that this money could be redirected into their terrorism groups, $100 billion total.
Do you believe Iran is a sponsor of terror?
Yes, actually, the administration has come out and said that they're the #1 top leader of state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
Why would anyone in their right mind give the top sponsor of terror $150 billion that they don't have today, Mrs. Clinton?
Well, this is what the UN has decided. And the thing, though, is their GDP is $400 billion as of last year. So $100 billion isn't a huge amount, but even if they're using 5 to 10% of that, that's $5 to $10 billion more that they have on this kind of spending.
Mr. Bush, what's your response to that?
Well, you know, the Iran deal is a bad deal. And all you have to do is look at Israel and look how they're panicking about this, you know, because they're the first one that are going to get nuked. And then Europe and then us. And so, I mean, of course, you don't want a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. But if Iran has a nuclear weapon, Israel's already got a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia is going to have one, Syria is going to have one, Jordan's going to have one. Everyone's going to be not buying nuclear weapons as fast as they can. And that's an unstable area. And I think that reminds me of a song from back in the 60s.
And what song was that?
So that's my theory, is you don't want to start a nuclear arms race there unless you're selling weapons. We're not really selling nuclear weapons to these folks. You know, the Koreans are going to sell it to them, or the Pakistanis are going to sell it to them, so we're not going to make any money off it. So it seems like there must have been some backroom deal between the Obama administration and the Pakistanis to work out some kind of nuclear arms race, because that's what the result of this is going to be.
Well, Mr. Bush, can you tell me what the Iran deal actually is?
Well, nobody really knows, because it was all done in secret. And it's kind of like the Obamacare bill. No one knows what, you know, you have to pass it to read it, and we never get to read it. And then there's also secret deals done between the government and the UN that the Congress doesn't know about. So it's all kind of a shady deal. But basically what it comes down to is we're trusting the Ayatollah to police themselves.
Well, my understanding is that when we ask to inspect their weapons site, they have 24 days to produce some dirt from that weapons site to let us inspect that dirt. How do you respond to that, Mrs. Clinton?
Right, yeah, I don't think a good thing. I think that this whole deal, though, it's going to be at least 6 to 12 months out before inspections are complete, rather, to pursue handing them over that money.
Do you believe that trusting the Iranians is the right thing to do, Mrs. Clinton?
I think it's a slippery slope.
Do you believe the Iranians are going to tell us the truth?
That's the hope. I mean, there's already proof that there's a attack tunnel under the border with Israel being built. So there's already clear indication that this extra money is probably not a good idea.
What do you think, Mr. Bush? Do you believe that we can trust the Iranians?
Well, I think the problem is that the president went to the UN instead of going to Congress. And it seems like Obama always wanted to be president of the world and not so much president of the United States. And that's maybe fine for the Iranians, but it's not so good for the American people.
Well, do you believe the Iranians are going to uphold the inspection regime that was even discussed in the UN and agreed to in this document?
Absolutely not.
And who do you think will be the ultimate beneficiary of this treaty that we're allegedly working towards?
Well, I think it'll help the Russians, because the Russians are going to sell nuclear centrifuges and nuclear power plants to the Iranians. And then for the weapons technologies, the Pakistanis will probably sell them what they've got and help them along. So I think it will benefit Iran and Russia and Pakistan. And I think it will make the Middle East a much more dangerous place, and it's already a very dangerous place.
Well, I have a question, Mrs. Clinton. What would you do should Iran drop a nuclear bomb on Israel?
That's a small question, isn't it? Well, like I've said in the past, China, for example, never fits neatly into a category like a friend or a rival. I think we need to treat these countries as neither pole or opposite. I think that there's still work to be done in negotiation and potentially figuring out where else this money can be funneled. But like I said, that $100 billion, even if they use a small amount, it's not a huge amount that they are able to funnel into this.
Well,
program.
you know that they run Hezbollah,
Yes.
the PLO, and they are undermining Syria, and they're fighting in Iraq, and they're literally all over the Middle East today with the money they earn. Mr. Bush?
I'd like to say something to all the Spanish-speaking people out in the audience. Hola, ¿cómo está? Yo quiero más cerveza. ¿Dónde están mis zapatas?
¿Dónde está? That's a muy bonita señorita.
Sí, claro.
Muy claro. Anyway, Miss Clinton, beyond those fine words spoken by Mr. Bush, my question to you is, I'm still looking, what would you do should there be a nuclear bomb dropped on Israel?
I think if it's directly related to those monies that they are going to get, is that what you're asking?
I would say that it could be directly related to the fact that this Iran deal that's being worked out and trumpeted by your party and supported by you potentially could be the first nuclear weapon that's used in the, whether it's used through one of its proxies or used directly by Iran. What would you do to Iran should Israel have a bomb dropped on it?
I think there could and should be retribution for sure.
And who would that retribution be targeted to?
To Iran and the parties
And
involved.
what type of retribution are you talking about? Sanctions?
Could be.
War?
Could be, although I think the money we have already spent on these past wars is way surpassed what's necessary, so I think there might be other routes.
I'll turn to you, Mr. Bush. I'm going to ask you the same question. What would you do as president should there be a bomb, nuclear bomb, dropped on Israel?
Well, I think it depends on who dropped it, but I think what it comes down to is it's kind of like what we say in Texas, closing the barn door after the horse is gone. You know, I mean, that's what we want to stop. The Iranians are promised to blow up Israel, and they promise to blow us up with nuclear bombs. And they get up every morning and chant, kill America, kill Israeli. So not really much doubt about their intentions, right? So if you're going to stop them from doing it, once they've done it, it's too late. I mean, the whole, you know, the cards are off, you know, the bets are off. Once Iran hits Israel, bets are off the table. Nobody knows what's going to happen. There may not be anything left on the planet after that day.
Would you act in a proactive manner?
Well, I would definitely act in a proactive manner. You know, I would say that we have to do everything possible to make sure that Iran doesn't get the bomb. And I would keep every option on the table for that.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to conclude our debate for the night. I wanted to thank you, Ms. Clinton, and you, Mr. Bush, for coming in and allowing some questions to be posed so we can see what kind of people you would be as president. Thank you very much.
Vote for Jim.
Hillary.